Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to the Winning Digital Customers livecast. Well, the holiday seasons are over, but it's still time to talk about the holiday shopping trends. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We have numbers in from a number of sources like the National Retail Federation in terms of how the 2021 holiday shopping season compared to prior ones. And the numbers are actually extremely interesting. Of course, COVID has a huge impact on people's shopping patterns, comfort in going to the store, role of digital versus physical, etc. And let's look at some numbers right now. I want to start with some numbers that were a survey conducted just before the holidays by Statista. And what you can see here is that if you look at those lines there, the blue line is the percentage of people who indicated that they were planning to do the predominance of their holiday shopping online. And the green line are people that said they were planning to do the predominance of their holiday shopping in physical stores. Now, what's interesting, of course, is if you go back and look at 2015, even that long ago, you can see that digital performed pretty well, but the green line was above the blue line. In the period of 2017, 18, 19, you can see that these lines were converging, and we had people saying roughly 50-50 that they were planning to do their holiday shopping online versus in the store. That grew dramatically last year in 2020, when all of a sudden we had more than 60% of people saying they were planning on doing their holiday shopping primarily online and less than 40 people in stores. No doubt that significant shift, even though it had been a growing trend over a number of years, that discontinuity was driven by coronavirus and discomfort with going into physical stores and adoption of new digital patterns. One of the big trend issues that I'm tracking very closely, and I would imagine that many of you are interested in, is clearly we saw a lot of behavioral shifts as a result of coronavirus. And of course, coronavirus is still with us. But as we start to look toward a period in which we move from the pandemic to the endemic or whatever it is, I'm certainly not going to pretend to be an infectious diseases person. But from a business perspective, as we start to move hopefully away from the crisis of the pandemic to this quote unquote supposed new normal, one of the questions we want to be asking ourselves is how much of the behavioral change that occurred during coronavirus is going to be with us to stay, and how much of it will go back to the way it was before. I'm sure people will go back to doing more travel than they were during the height of the pandemic, and many, going out to restaurants, etc. But will it be at the same level, or will there be some lingering effect of some of the behavioral changes? I know in my own life, I'm sure I'm going to continue to order groceries online, which was sort of something we adopted mostly during the pandemic. We hadn't done it a lot before that. And I'm sure many other people have new patterns of behavior that now that they've done it for a couple of years, either they discovered they liked, or it's just become an ingrained behavior. So here, what's interesting, though, is we are seeing some retrenching. If we look at the 2020 numbers, where we were over 60-40 in terms of the breakdown of people who said they were going to shop online versus shop in stores, we see that now has gone back down again. We are now at 57-42, still growth from 2019 for sure, but retrenching a little bit from the height of the pandemic. So that's interesting. That's that kind of getting a wider and then narrower distance between those two lines. So it'll be interesting to continue to observe that in coming years. And you're going to see in some other data that I'm going to share with you some similar-ish patterns where the growth of digital, and there certainly continues to be growth in digital, has slowed a little bit compared to some of the extreme growth we were seeing during the early stages of the pandemic. So now let's compare that to the actual or at least estimated holiday shopping. By the way, I might add, because you're going to see a little bit of what's going to look like a contradiction here, that this data, these rough numbers around the ratio of people who intend to shop online versus in store, come from multiple sources. This graph is from Statista. However, the National Retail Federation did a similar study, and their numbers are not exactly the same. As you would imagine with any kind of research, you're never going to be exactly the same, but very similar. The same pattern is shown in their research versus that in the research from Statista. So I think we could consider that a corroborated finding. Now let's look at the actual findings from the results of the season. I don't know that these are correct to the nickel, but this is generally speaking what occurred based on data from, again, multiple sources. Some of this is from eMarketer, some of this is from Insider Intelligence, and I'm going to show you other charts with sources from data from other sources as well. So this is corroborated data, although of course, it's an approximation. But you can see a couple things here. First of all, the good news is the big blue bar represents the growth in holiday spending, and there has not been a year where the holiday spending did not grow. It grew from 19 to 20. It grew from 20 to 20 to 21, which is great, and it grew more from 20 to 21 than from 19 to 20, as you can see. So the great news is that as we've seen an economic rebound, we saw holiday spending grow at an increased rate compared to what we saw between 19 and 20. Wonderful. So that's the blue bar. That's just to speak to the overall holiday shopping season. But now let's talk digital. The orange line represents the growth in digital. And of course, as you can see, digital is growing as well. But the point that I want to make here is that while digital grew, although overall shopping grew more between 20 and 21 than it did between 19 and 20, digital's growth decelerated. The growth in digital from 2019 to 2021 was a growth of 32%. If you look at the slope of that orange line between 19 and 20, between 20 and 21, the growth was half of that rate at only about 14.4% from 20 to 21. So, again, similar to the data that we saw in the survey, when we look at the cash register receipts, we're seeing a reduction in the rate of the growth of digital compared to the rate of growth of retail overall. And of course, that's a very different trend. I think this is probably the first year in many years where we've seen brick and mortar retail grow at a higher pace than digital. And so I thought that was very interesting. And again, probably a, very tightly tied to the course of the pandemic. By the way, I want to mention an interesting contradiction here. You recall in the prior slide that we showed that approximately 57% of people indicated that they were planning to use digital as the primary way of purchasing holiday gifts. Here you can see, though, that in actual fact, based on cash register receipts, digital represented about $211 billion of the roughly $1.15 billion in the total pie of retail during the holiday season. Clearly not 60%, not even 50%, represents, somewhere in the range of 20%. And so that's an interesting distinction, and also supported by multiple data points. In other words, this data is also corroborated by multiple studies that show very similar trends in terms of total dollars. And I think there's a few reasons. I can only speculate as to why we see that huge difference. I think the holiday retail sales includes a lot of different types of categories. For example, it would include grocery, which is a very, very large category of retail. And I'm guessing that when they ask people about where are you planning to do your holiday shopping in the surveys, it largely was not, people weren't thinking about things like grocery. They were probably thinking about gift buying. So the gift buying component of holiday seems to have been much more heavily favoring digital, but there clearly are other aspects of holiday purchases, or at least that would be one logical explanation for this discrepancy. Another could simply be that people overestimate. They have this perception that they're using digital more predominantly than they are. Or another could be that those people that are using digital are either spending less, or they're spending, while they're buying a lot on digital through digital channels, they're also making some major purchases in the physical, traditional retail channel. For example, they may go buy all their holiday gifts on Amazon, but then they go buy a car at their local car dealership. And obviously that would skew the amount of money they're spending in one channel versus another. So I'm honestly not really sure. I'm just speculating a little bit, but I thought it was interesting to see the substantial distinction between the survey data and the actual cash register data. A couple of other trends that similarly support this idea that while digital is still a super important part of the economy and the holiday shopping experience, it is slowing a bit. A study by Adobe showed that the percentage of smartphone holiday shopping has kind of plateaued. You can look at the blue line. You can see that the dotted red line is just a trend line. And you can see that trend has been continuing pretty consistently since 2014, with year over year over year over year growth in the use of smartphones for holiday shopping. And yet you see this year, it's kind of flattened. Again, this may be due to coronavirus, fewer people shopping while they're out and about, more people at home. When you're at home, if you have a laptop or a desktop or some other method of shopping, you don't get as much benefit from being able to do your shopping on your smartphone. Since you're home, you can use either device. And of course, larger screen may be more convenient. Again, just my speculation. We may see this turn around again once more people are out and about, or we may not, because more people may move into a more permanent model of more work from home, et cetera. And perhaps that will disadvantage smartphone shopping compared to traditional, desktop, laptop, or even tablet models of accessing e-commerce experiences. So another trend that supports this overall idea that e-commerce, while continuing to grow, has slowed its growth. Another interesting stat, we looked specifically at Thanksgiving weekend, and you can see here again, if you look at, let's just look at the first section, the Thanksgiving section. You can see how this is the e-commerce revenue during Thanksgiving weekend. And you can see that it was growing from 18 to 19, growing from 19 to 20, but from 20 to 21, it's flat. And if you look at specifically Black Friday or specifically Cyber Monday, you can actually see that e-commerce revenue on those days is actually down a little bit. Now, as you recall from our prior graphs, overall e-commerce revenue is up for the holiday season. So what this is saying to us is that the growth of e-commerce during the holiday season, and again, just to be clear, it is growing. It's just not growing as rapidly as it was previously. But that growth is not happening during Thanksgiving weekend. It could be because we see a little bit of a return to the stores. It could be that because people are favoring in-person shopping on those specific days. Or it could simply be that the holiday season continues to be stretched out. I saw this year a lot of Cyber Monday or Black Friday deals being offered weeks in advance of the actual dates of Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So it may simply be that there's just no reason to concentrate your holiday shopping on those particular days. But in terms of a behavioral pattern of when people are doing their holiday shopping in the e-commerce realm, for sure, we see that people are no longer growing their use on those days the way they're growing their overall use. All the growth is happening on other days, not that Black Friday, Thanksgiving weekend, and Cyber Monday. So let's look at a couple of specific retailers to wrap up our session today. Amazon's total sales for the holiday season in 2021 were just a tad lower than their 2020 numbers. You can also see that the aggregate of large retailers like Target, Walmart, Macy's, et cetera, is also down a bit since from 2021 versus 2020. So the growth in e-commerce during the 2021 season did not come on Amazon. Now, of course, Amazon saw huge increases last year, and we're going to look at that previously. So to even maintain their incredible growth from 2019 to 2020 for Amazon, you could argue is tremendous, or to maintain within 1%, which arguably is probably smaller than the margin of error of this particular analysis. But we also saw a reduction, as I say, in the use of the sort of conglomerate of other large retail brands, and who gained that growth. Because remember, again, the sales are up. And by the way, I should be clear that this doesn't mean that I might have misspoken a moment ago. Amazon's sales weren't necessarily lower. It's that their percentage of the total was slightly lower. So the sales are up. Amazon's sales quite very possibly could be up, but their share of the pie has shrunk a little bit, as has it for these other retailers. So who's gained from the reduction in these other retailers? The answer is individual brand sites have gained. Look at that, 56 to 58%. Again, not a massive jump, but still, this is where the share seems to be going. Sites like Nike or Levi's or Lush, individual brand sites, smaller brand-specific sites are growing again, this is just holiday season data, of course, at the expense of some of the larger, more sort of department store type sites, whether they're pure plays like Amazon or whether they're omni-channel retailers like Macy's. And then we have this other category, and I wish I could give you a little more insight into this, but on my assumption that it might be things like Etsy, eBay, or other even more niche websites. And again, you can see that there's more growth there. So at least this year, most of the growth that occurred was not from the kind of classic big retailers, but were from smaller brands and smaller, more independent or alternative e-commerce platforms. So again, an interesting kind of change in trend from what we've seen over the years. An exception to that we must underscore, though, is Target. Even though the growth in across the general category of sort of department store type sites was not was down, Target's growth was fantastic. And if you look here at this chart, what this is showing is the growth. This is showing the November sales. So again, slightly different metric than our holiday season sales, different study done by a different source, in this case from Bloomberg. But in any case, what you can see here is, of course, as I mentioned earlier, Amazon's growth in their e-commerce in 2019 versus, sorry, in 2020 versus 2019 was enormous. As you can see, 49% growth. This is just their November numbers, but it's reflective of the general pattern. The coronavirus, of course, was fantastic for Amazon's business. I'm sure they wouldn't have wished it on the world, but clearly they needed to respond to it, and they did. And whereas if you look at the impact between 20 and 21, it was much more muted. Amazon's only up 5% in November in 21 compared to 20. Best Buy is only up 1%. And it makes sense, of course, that Amazon would be up so much more than some of these omni-channel retailers, since digital was, the omni-channel retailers had massive reductions in their in-store sales in 2020 for sure. Obviously, they had growth in their e-commerce platforms. Amazon has a nominal in-store physical presence, but is obviously 99% plus probably e-commerce sales. So that makes sense why Amazon was disproportionately benefited in 2020. But it's interesting to see that, a Target, which was up 14% last year, despite the hit to their physical stores, was up still 10% in 2021. So we're not going to get into the details of all the things that Target's been doing, but clearly they are a success story. And if you compare that to Walmart, which was down 4%, again, massive physical store presence for Walmart, so very hard hit. But also they're the second largest online retailer in the United States. So Walmart clearly saw a real hit in 2020 and then only a 5%. So they're sort of flat in 2021 compared to where they were in 2019, whereas Target is up 24%. So massive, massive difference between the performance of Target and Walmart. So, okay, just some interesting, and just a couple other quick notes. One of the big winners of the 2021 holiday season was Apple. Apple's e-commerce sales. Look at Apple's e-commerce sales. 2019, $5 billion, 2020, $9 billion, 2021, $13 billion. And I believe this combines both hardware and, software apps, et cetera. But nevertheless, this is a massive, massive level of growth, clearly massively outpacing pretty much anyone else and clearly outpacing the overall market. So congratulations to Apple. It's not like they're new on the scene, right? It's not like the demand for their products just emerged in 2021, but their growth, according to Business Insider, is probably leading across not only their sector, but the entire retail shopping space. So congratulations to them. So that was what I wanted to share with you about holiday trends. Be sure you are following me on LinkedIn because I have some upcoming videos. I'm going to be talking about the whole of 2021. What do we see in terms of trends in e-commerce versus traditional, et cetera, as we look at all of the aggregated data we have for 2021 for shopping. We're also going to be doing some upcoming sessions in other categories as well, like media and entertainment. So be sure you're subscribed if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And thank you, as always, for watching and listening the Winning Digital Customers Livecast. Look forward to seeing you next time. Till then, keep transforming.